You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
With ducks moving back north, it is time to start thinking about habitat and habitat management for the coming growing season. We hit the hot button habitat decision matrix for the coming season in this episode. What foods to grow, what conditions to create, how it differs from north to south, and how it all goes down on public versus private lands. Plus, we dive into some prairie condition updates and what the coming spring and summer will bring for breeding ducks. A quick reminder to rate, follow, like, and share the Foul Weather Podcast to get all the latest updates and our exclusive duck migration forecast each Monday morning throughout season. Plus, all of our informative content throughout the rest of the year. Be the guy at the coffee shop with the real information about the ducks and where the ducks are at. I appreciate you all being here with me very, very much. We thank our every week listeners. You know who you are. Those that never miss a single migration forecast episode each Monday morning. You all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks even know where they're at. Think about that. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they are at. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the Foul Weather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. I'm your host, DrMike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. Let's start with a Jaeger update because we haven't done one of those in a while. Jaeger, or baby Jaeger's our 48-pound pocket lab, a yellow lab. Well, I guess maybe a bit over 48 pounds after the long winter we had. She got a little bit of junk in the trunk, as they say, but she's doing great with her liver issue. She had copper storage disease and a condition that had her immune system attacking her liver. Lots of stuff going on. We have her on copper-free dog food through a company called Voyager. Not a sponsor, but they've been really good with us, and really appreciate the work that they've done to provide really high-quality copper-free food. Again, that's Voyager. And you know, I say something folks should look into is getting a senior blood panel for their dogs, I guess, once they hit about that age of 6. Yellow labs seem real susceptible to this copper storage disease, and especially females, actually. So we picked up the high ALT values. Those kind of show liver damage going on when kind of on a, you know, and then after that went on like this full CSI mission to determine the causes. She's on immune suppressants and some, I think it's called thyroxine, because she had some thyroid thing going on too. Yeah, she's a mess, but you would never know it because we caught it early and we have, you know, her ALT values now into the normal high range. So her liver is no longer degrading at a rate that would have probably killed her, you know, a few years back. So that said, she's 9.5 years old and still trucking along as our major workhorse in the marsh. And Dr. Zug, our yellow lab, well, he's nearly 12 and fully retired. I don't even think we tried pheasants with him this year. I don't think we got him on a pheasant this year. So maybe next year if we can make him through the summer again. So we are 100% getting a puppy from Virginia in a few weeks to ensure we have a functional young working dog for the marsh for the coming years. Jaeger has, you know, a few more years in her, but she's going to fade fast as all kind of old dogs do. My wife has work in Georgia coming up and then is going to pick up the new female yellow from Virginia and drive it back to the farm in Jack's Reef. So I get a puppy summer, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm hoping that drive goes well. I wish I could go with her, but I'm teaching class and there's just no way to bug out for that many days to pick a puppy up, unfortunately. So this one is going to be named Nimue, baby Nimue. We'll go with baby Nimue for now. I think she's going to be a bit bigger dog than Jaeger. I really like that, like 48, 50 pound range. You know, you can lift them right up and hold them in the air by their vest and grab the duck out of their mouth, let them, you know, hang there and drip, and then, you know, bring them into the boat or put them on the dog stand. But this one's going to be a little bit bigger, but we're going with the name Nimue. It's from kind of the King Arthur Merlin tales. Nimue is the Lady of the Lake. I guess the story goes is Nimue is a fairy or fairy-like enchantress residing in a magical realm beneath a lake. She bestows the sword Excalibur to King Arthur, and the wizard Merlin tragically falls in love with her, and she manipulates him into teaching her his magical secrets. I guess some versions portray her as a villain, others show her as a cunning figure protecting herself, using these spells to imprison Merlin for eternity. In the end, Nimue serves as a keeper of magic and guides Arthur to the mystical paradise island of Avalon upon his death. There's a lot of tellings of the tales of Nimue, and having run out of decent German names with Zeugenru, which is Dr. Zug, which is a term used in German ornithology to describe migration, and Jägermeister, or Jaeger, which means game master in German, we figured something more British or Scottish might work. I'm of German ancestry mostly. My wife is Scottish, which redhead, Scottish, it's a whole thing in and of itself. But we figured we'd go and give Nimue a try. So I'm sure she's going to have all kinds of names, this young pup, like You Little Effer, which was Baby Jaeger's nickname for a while. You little effer! She was like running away with stuff in her mouth, not listening, and, you know, all the jazz that comes with puppies. But it's going to be the summer of Nimue for me, and I'm pretty excited about it, right? So, okay, enough tall tales of fairies and such. This is a duck podcast after all, right? This week and for the next several episodes, we're going to really focus on non-breeding season duck habitat. My schedule this summer is really packed, especially late in summer when we typically conduct our habitat assessments with landowners. I'm teaching my 2-week wetland monitoring and assessment course, 10-hour days in the marshes of New York with students. A great class, but definitely a time eater. I'm also heading to the DU Expo this year in Memphis, so looking forward to seeing many of you there. No need, I don't think we're going to do a booth or anything like that, but just want to do a meet and greet with all the great people across duck country at the DU Expo. We also have a postdoctoral researcher starting in our lab in August, so need to be around for that. But anyhow, that all said, and with the ongoing clients for our habitat consulting, we really only have room for like one more client this year. So if you're interested in a professionally developed habitat and hunt management plan for your property, please reach out ASAP. Because again, we're likely only taking on one new person, one new client this year. Just the time crunch overall just can't fit other stuff in and do justice to all the work, and current clients as well want to make sure they have the consultation they need as well. So next we dive into spring and summer weather and what it means for spring duck migration and breeding conditions. So please stick with me. We all know that feeling. Every waterfowl hunter knows the feeling. You're motionless in the marsh at first light, watching birds work the spread, hoping this season is as good as the last, hoping that the future has birds working the spread for generations to come. At the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, the mission is simple: to guarantee all Americans quality places to hunt and fish. For waterfowl hunters, that means safeguarding habitat and migration corridors and creating more places to hunt, so strong fall flights and good hunting opportunities aren't a thing of the past. As the nation's largest coalition of conservation groups, TRCP brings together hunters, anglers, and conservation partners to make sure the future of waterfowl hunting stays strong. Learn more today and join the TRCP by visiting trcp.org. Folks, do go check out TRCP. They are doing great work. We are looking to have a few TRCP staff on in the coming months to detail some of that great work that they are doing for the ducks and duck people across duck country. We are going to dive into spring migration and breeding conditions forecasts next, but I do want to emphasize a hot button issue once again and why I am not engaged, because I've been asked to be on a podcast or other podcasts, and I've had listeners ask me to interview the clowns in Louisiana. The issue is that any Yahoo with a microphone can produce a podcast nowadays and somehow have a voice because it plays to people's preconceived notions. Much of the time, nothing coming through your wavelengths is facts. So the corn stuff is what I'm talking about. And I want to reiterate the letter to the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is goins nowhere. Listen to me closely. I repeat, it is goins nowhere. I will be surprised if there was even a response by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So let it fade into oblivion. I know that science nowadays isn't sexy, but it does remain the gold standard for decision-making for ducks. A, nobody cares about your feelings. And B, feelings are not objectively defensible, so you can feel whatever you want. But the measuring stick is and will continue to be science and science-based objective decision-making. Imagine if every dang PETA-loving person's feelings had just as much weight as your duck hunting feelings. Remember that hunters are only 5% of the population, and duck hunters are even less. Hunters alone in this country are 5% of the population, and duck hunters are even less than that. So let us all stick together. Keep your stick on the ice, folks. I'm pulling for you. For those of you that don't believe in science, please check your feelings at the door. All right. Enough on that sorry subject. Let's talk weather and what's coming in the next few months for ducks. First, the Atlantic flyway needs to get ready for a huge push of waterfowl north with temperatures heading into the mid-60s and rain coming. It is on like Donkey Kong, as they say, kids. The red-winged blackbirds showed up at the farm yesterday, despite it still being in single digits yesterday morning. I'm recording this way ahead because I'm going to ice fishing camp in the Adirondacks, so this is like mid last week, but we did have single digits still in the morning, and even though it has never gotten above freezing, the snow was melting during that kind of single-digit period, right? Because there's just too much sunshine on dark surfaces, and spring is coming. As much as winter wants to hold on, it can't. The days are just getting too long now for winter to hold on much longer. Couple that with the warmth pushing up through Ontario and rains coming. Snow geese. Snow geese are going to be on the move big time out of Pennsylvania and into New York. They're already probably started by the time this podcast comes out, but it is going to ramp up fast during the week coming after this podcast is released on Monday. The ducks are going to be coming right after, or kind of along with some of the snow geese from the mid-Atlantic region. So get out, see the spectacular spring migration with all the snow locally. We are going to flood massively with rain on 2 feet of snow that's remaining, and the ducks are going to be loving all the flooding of the annual weed seeds. These annual plants grew really well last year in the drought throughout much of the Northeast. Now the water returns to feed hungry ducks headed north. The story is going to be different once you get into the prairie region, with colder air holding on and even some additional snow coming in the next 2 weeks. Unfortunately, that snow is not going to be all that we hoped. All of Manitoba looks okay with cold and snowpack, but then in the kind of parklands of Alberta and Saskatchewan, they at least have some snow as well. But the western prairies remain really dry, as well as nearly the entirety of the U.S. prairies. I saw some graphic in the DU magazine that just showed what I thought were way better habitat conditions than what I thought. So maybe somehow I'm off the mark, but I'm looking at drought monitors, and the western prairies in Canada and the U.S. prairies are really, really dry. It's also doubtful that much snow will continue at this point. So now we're going to have to rely on spring rains at the right time to help reboot wetlands in the U.S. which kind of is the forecast that we're going to have this kind of like wet, cold spring. So we can only hope for continued moisture at the right time. Overall, the snowpack across Alaska and the Canadian Boreal all the way over to eastern Canada is substantial. Soil moisture in about 25% of Alaska is above normal, and large portions of Alberta and Saskatchewan are the same, kind of north portions. Manitoba is looking really good, and all of eastern Canada is about normal for moisture. But remember, wetlands are much more stable in the eastern breeding area as well. I'm optimistic for moderate production of ducks this year across the breeding range. I think the east is in really good shape in general, but we got months to go, so we will see. We're going to put some imagery of drought conditions on social media again and keep you updated, but the point is that spring migration is on, so get the family out to see this amazing spectacle. Up next, what's habitat got to do with it? Everything, right? My friends across duck country, time to step up your calling with Beckman Game Calls. These beauties sound like a duck. Just have a listen. First, a real hen mallard, and then the Edison in the flooded timber of Arkansas. Beckman Game Calls with a lot of new colors and woods coming soon. Both the Edison and the Groundbreaker calls are adjustable to your air pressure, and the Groundbreaker is the first adjustable cut down on the market. Check out Beckman Game Calls today at beckmangamecalls.com. And we are back. A bit of habitat how-to for our non-breeding ducks. And I know this has been talked about before, but there are nuances, and it's always good to put our finger on the decision matrix at or near the beginning of each growing season. Now, we are going to talk in generalizations because the diversity of habitats that ducks use is, diverse. First and foremost, we need to recognize the strong differences in management types between northern and southern latitude areas. In the north, we have a greater abundance of emergent wetlands, places that stay wet most of the time. In the south, wetlands are dry much of the year and produce amazing moist soil conditions, but they also come with greater invasive species issues than northern wetlands. A primary question we get from folks in the north is, I want to make this wetland better. What can I do? Or, I'd really like to take this forested wetland and convert it into an open wetland that I can manage. Much of the time, there really isn't much you can do with an existing wetland because it is more than likely a protected wetland. Now, of course, right now we are shredding environmental protection left, right, and center at the federal level. But most states still have wetland protections that will stop you from doing much with an existing wetland. There are many, many farmed areas that were previously wetlands, and that is your best bet for producing quality duck habitat and taking advantage of programs that will even help with technical and financial assistance. I really want to repeat this because it needs to be hammered home. There are many, many farmed areas that were previously wetlands that is your best bet for producing quality duck habitat and taking advantage of programs that will even help with technical and financial assistance. These soils are also conducive to moist soil management and hot cropping, which most folks are looking for. Your best bet is to hire a consultant that knows how to read soils and wetland maps and can identify if a location is prime for purchase and restoration. Sometimes it is as easy as pulling drain tile from a portion of a field and restoring the prior hydrology and including a water control structure to seasonally manage water. If you're looking to purchase property, look to find places that are permanent emergent wetlands that go through the muskrat cycle on their own, whereby the cattail and other emergent wetland takes over, then is eaten out by muskrats, then abandoned by muskrats, dries out, grows new food, and then gets wet again, and the cycle all restarts, right? Lots of folks want to buy places that are beaver flows. But remember that beaver flow wetlands only last at optimal for a few years and then might even see a 15 to 20 year period before they're very good again once those beaver abandon. So be aware of places loaded with ducks that was created by beavers, because it's probably only going to last about 5 years before it starts to decline. I've seen a lot of guides buy beaver pond complex wetlands in the north with the idea that this is going to be the place that I'm going to take clients for years and years and years, and then it's for sale on the market. So if you're not looking to those farm field areas, right, with the right soils that you can restore, don't go for the beaver pond wetland complex. Go for that emergent marsh that has a solid muskrat population that cycles through time. Overall, I think the biggest mistake duck hunters make when looking for land in the north is looking for wetlands. You need to look for farm fields that want to be wetlands. There are many of these, and they are increasingly coming up for sale. Farmers also hate the low parts of their fields and are sometimes willing to part with them for the right price. Each day, that price is increasing. But often when you buy a wetland property for hunting, it is surrounded also by low portions of fields where farmers are struggling to farm in at least 25% of the years. These spots are prime if you can have a consultant help you identify them, and then you knock on doors with a suitcase full of cash. They're also usually in some type of infrastructure already that helps you grow and flood hot crops. Or better yet, grow spectacular moist soil plants to feed a diversity of ducks and other wildlife. Now in the south, we are mostly looking at flooded bottomland hardwoods, sloughs, bayous, and a lot of restored bottomlands as moist soil areas with water control structures. These are areas that were previously cleared and laser leveled, removing the natural ridge and swale topography from southern U.S. alluvial systems. Emergent wetlands filled with a diversity of perennial plants and having more stable conditions are much less common as you head south. As noted, invasives that can take over managed moist soil areas are much more problematic in the south. Folks might not realize it if you live in the south, but coffeeweed, red vine, Johnson grass, and cocklebur don't even exist up north, or they don't exist in enough density to be overly problematic in managed wetlands most of the time. In the south, they can cause complete loss of quality moist soil plants. But we also don't have things like Dallas or Vasey's grass, which is the paspalum. Supposedly, we have the great moist soil grass sprangletop, but I've never seen it north of Illinois. Whereas the seeds that make up moist soil foods are much more diverse in the south. So the plants and the seeds that make up moist soil foods are much more diverse in the south. In the north, usually about 5 to 10 species typically make up 90+% of the food available to ducks. This includes barnyard grass, your wild millets, right? Smartweeds, rice cutgrass, bidens or sticktights, nutsedge tubers, and panic grass. But we also have high food density plants in emergent wetlands that are way less typical in the south, including burrweed, spike rushes, bulrushes, pondweeds, arrowhead, and water plantain. So there are real differences in habitat types used by ducks and the foods that we can grow between the north and south. Whereas, right, up north, the challenge is getting the water off and keeping non-seed producing perennial plants like reed, canary grass, phragmites, and cattail from taking over a marsh. The south has annuals like coffeeweed and cocklebur that can drown desired annual grasses. Again, the north has ongoing perennial invasive issues, where the south has annuals like coffeeweed and cocklebur that can drown desired annual grasses. In both cases, though, intervention is needed. In the south, you need to have your eyes on your wetlands, because if you draw it down and walk away until you need to reflood the unit, you could be looking at a field of cocklebur that if you had been able to herbicide it midsummer, you could still have been able to set off a wonderful crop of barnyard grass underneath. In the north, the hope is to control the ongoing perennials, but you certainly have time. You just can't let the creeping loss of good ground continue. You likely need to be more aggressive with herbicide on the front end to ensure the problem does not get established and out of control. Okay, so lots of specifics there with plant names. If you own land and are trying to manage for duck food but don't know your plants, you have to get your school on, or hire a consultant that can help you understand what is and is not quality duck food, and if you have problem plants, how to deal with them. I would suggest you pick up a book, A Guide to the Moist Soil Wetland Plants of the Mississippi Alluvial Valley. Of course, this book is especially helpful for our southern friends, but many of the plants are also northern plants. Maybe someday I'll spearhead a book for northern latitudes in the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways, but I got to tell you, that book was a huge lift when working at Mississippi State many moons ago. I've noted previously on the podcast, we get no royalties from the book. I am the lead author on it. We get none of the authors on there. Heath Hagee's an author. My wife's an author. James Callicutt's an author. And then our friend Josh Cheshire, who's working oil rigs in like the state of Washington or something now, but he's not in the wetland business anymore. But the rest of those names you will recognize in general. So none of us get royalties from that book. They all go to the James C. Kennedy Endowed Chair in Waterfowl and Wetlands Conservation at Mississippi State University. That is run right now by Dr. Brian Davis, another name you should recognize. So get your copy of that today and learn your plants. Up next, some insight about private and public wetland management from someone that's been around the block a time or two. So please stick with me. It is months until planting season, but your vision is already clear. The land is your passion, and Hancock Seed has your back. You plan food plots to feed and attract game in ways that matter for months. Live on your land with Hancock Seed. Today you plan, tomorrow you harvest. With Hancock Seed, you get family farm faith, nearly a century in the making. Hancock Seed has partnered with Foul Weather to produce 3 distinct seed blends. The Northern Deer Food Plot Mix, a proven combination that keeps deer coming all year round. The Southern Waterfowl Mix for carbohydrate-driven ducks. And the Northern Waterfowl Mix, built to succeed even in the toughest summers. Hancock Seed specializes from turf to plow and beyond. Find them today at hancockseed.com. That's hancockseed.com. Real quick here before we jump into the habitat management on private lands discussion. The Foul Weather by Hancock Seed mixes are engineered to deliver continuous attraction while also improving soil health and plot sustainability. What the heck does that mean? It sounds like mumbo jumbo, but it's not. Let's start with the Northern Deer Food Plot Mix. This one we've really dialed in over the last decade. If you live or are near soybean growing soils, this one's really going to work for you. Continuous attraction means that if you plant this at the beginning of August, when all other soybeans in your neighborhood are getting tough and browning down, the soybeans in this mix are just getting green, and the deer will eat them down at least 3 times before they expire. That is the beans, not the deer. Usually the freeze finally shuts them down. They just keep pumping out leaves as the deer eat them. The buckwheat and the sunflowers in the mix get nipped by deer as they graze on the soybeans as well. Underneath, the dwarf Essex brassica and red kale are coming on as we move towards a freeze. At the freeze, the sunflowers wilt, but the deer keep after the leaves and eat the heads of the developing flowers right in one big bite. Then the brassicas and red kale shine after a few freezes. Up north, we are now getting into or near the rut, and the does and fawns on the plot bring the bucks by at the right time, at just the right time. The deer switch to the brassica and kale, not because the sugars increase after a few freezes. That has been debunked. A lot of folks are like, oh, it gets sweeter. It does, but the sugars don't increase. That has been debunked by Dr. Craig Harper, professor and extension wildlife specialist at the University of Tennessee. The reality, and I'd say yet to be tested, but I've worked enough with plant evolution concepts to know this true. The reality is that the phenolic compounds decline in brassicas once they have sent energy down for the winter. These are biennials, which means they grow one year and flower and seed the next. Because they are biennials, once they have sent energy down to the roots to store for winter that they will use to grow the next year, they stop producing the toxic, bitter phenolic compounds because that would pull energy from the roots needed for next year's growth. Follow me. It doesn't make sense to protect the above ground vegetation anymore, so the bitter phenolics disappear and the plant becomes more palatable to herbivores like deer. Anyhow, that is why brassicas like kale and Brussels sprouts are bitter in your garden until a few frosts. Deer experience the same thing. So, okay, now the brassicas are getting big and really coming on. Deer are hitting them. The Austrian winter peas are also at the stage where they have climbed the remaining sunflower and buckwheat stalks, but they won't flower, this year. The Austrian winter peas won't flower this year, but they have a root system established enough to survive winter under the snow. Now we are into December and February, and the deer dig through the snow and eat the brassica right down to the stem. They eat the stalks to the ground. So at this point, we've had deer in the plot from late August until February. The March thaw comes, and into April and May, the brassica grow again, and they start to flower. The Austrian winter peas explode from the dormant roots and flower, producing peas, and here comes the soil health and plot sustainability. When the peas flower, they fix nitrogen, and they pump nitrogen back into the soil by biological processes. The deer forage through the peas throughout the summer, and in mid-August, the plot gets tilled under, incorporating all that green and all that nutrition from the growing season into the soil, and the cycle starts all over again in a few weeks. Now, our northern and southern waterfowl food plot mixes are built for sustainability as well. Like many commercial waterfowl food plot mixes, they do have the typical domestic stuff. But they also have the insurance with natural plants like barnyard grass, smartweed, panic grass, and chufa that will reseed itself in the following year. The Japanese millet, the chihuahua, and the proso millet provide that domestic crop boost for high food density, and the natural seeds provide the insurance for a bad growing season. They also drop seed that revitalizes the food plot for the following year, because unlike domestic crops, they will reseed themselves. Overtopping after year one with the addition of invasive species control will keep your waterfowl food plot continuously providing the high carbohydrate seeds sought by a diversity of ducks. The panic grass for the small seed eaters like teal and pintails, the mallard buffet of the millets, and the grass chaff that breaks down over winter and provides the habitat for bugs needed by hungry hens that are thinking about producing eggs as spring looms. Anyhow, check them out today at Hancock Seed by Foul Weather and click Notify Me when available. How many days have you had empty skies over the duck blind? Cameras full of deer except when you're there. Turkeys that just won't turkey right. Your property can be more with Wildlife Strategies. It is no secret that hiring a consultant, an expert in managing water, woods, and fields, an expert in duck foods and deer and turkey habitat, an expert in hunting pressure management. Well, it is no secret that hiring a consultant yields better habitat for the critters you chase. Less empty skies, more quality days afield, more smiles for miles with family and friends. If that's your game and goal, contact Ryan Delaney at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. Okay, on to the public versus private management conversation. We are working to get folks on that can talk very directly on how we have an absolute failure at the wheel on our federal national wildlife refuges. We've seen similar issues on state areas in many places, not everywhere, but definitely still a thing. overall, my 1,000-foot level observation from working for federal, state, academic, nonprofit, and industry entities. This is where I'm at. We have a changed focus by most folks coming out of college that then go work at public hunting lands. Increasingly, they don't come from a hunting background, and not enough of them understand that although hunters only make up 5% of the population, their conservation impact and passion has a far greater positive effect on the environment. So first and foremost, we need to ensure that we are training hunter conservationists through university programs. Delta Waterfowl Foundation is probably doing a better job of helping that area than others, but Ducks Unlimited also provides an abundance of scholarships to graduate students conducting hunter conservationist directed research. So both groups are doing the good work to ensure we are training the next generation of scientists, conservationists, and managers that come from a hunting background. Those are just facts, folks. Next, we as the public need to demand that infrastructure be maintained at a level that public officials can actually manage lands as they were intended. We can't defund the National Wildlife Refuge System and then expect these folks to have any capacity to meet your needs of quality hunting opportunities. But here, we also see that public officials are often treating their lands as islands. Public officials are treating their lands as islands to save everything everywhere all the time, when in fact those lands were purchased and funded with hunter dollars. Look, and don't shoot me for this, I'm an environmentalist. I care about all the critters. But you've heard me before. If the non-game folks want to save everything everywhere all the time, then go raise that money. Quit stealing from the hunting community. At minimum, provide the basics for quality habitat to attract enough ducks to satisfy the hunting public that paid for the place in the first place. Okay, but in contrast, we have private lands that are just takers and don't give much more back than duck habitat. When people ask me how a wetland should be managed, I usually respond by saying it should work to mimic the historic hydrology, because all the plants and animals in that area are adapted to that hydrological cycle that has happened for millennia and probably longer than that. But many clubs ignore that and certainly can attract and kill ducks, but they do abandon the other wetland-dependent wildlife in that process sometimes. There is a lesson to be learned from clubs like Winus Point Shooting Club and Marsh Conservancy that aims to maintain wetlands for all wildlife while also providing an amazing shooting experience for members. There are clubs like this across the country. And I beg folks to think about all the cool critters that use your marsh, use your club, and make it home for part of the year. I think we hit on a good amount of hot button topics on habitat this week, but I will leave you with this. A recent paper, and this is science stuff, kids, so hang in there. And it's good science stuff. And again, science is going to be the gold standard that we use to make decisions about duck habitat, duck conservation, and duck harvest. It ain't going anywhere except that. I'm going to leave you with this. A recent paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The paper is entitled Overlooked and Overexploited: Extensive Conversion of Grasslands and Wetlands Driven by Global Food, Feed, and Bioenergy Demand. The paper notes that conversion rate of grasslands and wetlands to agriculture was about 4 times that of forest conversion to agriculture. I'll repeat that. The paper notes that conversion rate of grasslands and wetlands to agriculture was about 4 times that of forest conversion to agriculture. Brazil contributed 13% of the global total, and Russia, India, China, and the United States each contributed about 6%. That's our prairies, kids. That 6% is our prairies. While drivers varied greatly across regions, globally 50% of the conversion was linked to pasture, and 27, 17, and 6% of cropland for food, feed, and other uses, and this is the other uses is mainly bioenergy or ethanol, respectively. So 27% was for food, 17% was for feed, and 6% was for biofuel, respectively, right? Okay. Among conversion-linked commodities, most livestock-associated products served domestic demand, so within country demand, right? While 32% of feed crops and 20% of all crops were exported. So this is about global economies and global movement of products. These findings reveal important areas for grassland and wetland conservation to focus and goals that aligning local actions and global supply chains governance. Ooh. All right, that's a lot. It basically means the global market's got to get their shit together if we're actually going to save grasslands and wetlands. We have to think about all this stuff together. So the prairies are getting ate up. Some of it's about what happens on the prairies itself and what stays in country, but some of it is also about the export and the demand of the world in general for food. So I'd say time to do better, my friends. We can't hide from the fact that farming is gobbling up grasslands and wetlands worldwide, and certainly this is happening in the U.S. and Canadian prairies. That is duck habitat. That ducks need to make more ducks, and duck hunters need ducks. Just the facts, folks. Don't hate me for reporting. And I will leave you with one single comment. That we are going to dig deep into this summer. Conserving ducks, other wildlife, and the environment is not a popularity contest, and I will not be part of it. The Foul Weather Podcast is a science-based podcast that calls BS when BS rears its ugly head. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.